Jehovah's Witnesses are having the same problem that the Catholic Church is having. And the reason why is because they handle what we call CSA issues the same way. They tried to handle it in-house and it failed. If anyone is ignorant of Jehovah's Witnesses in 2025, it's only by choice. It's
Yeah.
only by choice.
100%. Can you speak to your time that you spent in the Watchtower in New York?
Within the Jehovah's Witness religion, it is very, very prestigious. It is
Okay.
basically, as we used to say, it is the Jehovah's Witnesses version of Harvard and Yale.
I was going to say, isn't that what most people do when they get the literature from JW?
That's what they say.
It's put it in my burn pile.
Yeah, they put it up in the bird cages they on Facebook.
Yeah. JT, thank you so much for meeting with me today.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
You just have such an inside look of what's going on in the Jehovah Witness religion. So thanks for your time, and I'll let you take it away and start wherever you'd like to.
Well, my name is JT, and we have a website. My wife and I, Lady C, we have a website, and we refer to it as ExJW Critical Thinkers. And one of the reasons that we called it that is because we found that that was one of the biggest problems that Jehovah's Witnesses have, and that is a lack of critical thinking. As a Jehovah's Witness, you're kind of given information and you're basically told not to question it. We often joke that you can ask all the questions you want, you just can't question the answers after they've been given to you. So it kind of keeps you in a certain mode where you basically learn to stay in your place. So as far as myself and my wife, we both grew up as Jehovah's Witness kids, and the life of a Jehovah's Witness young person can be very, very challenging because the normal things that kids do as a Jehovah's Witness, you don't do. You don't celebrate any of the holidays. You don't participate in many of the school activities. And if you do any of those things, you're considered by the rest of the congregation as spiritually weak. And so we grew up in this religion, and after high school, like so many other Jehovah's Witnesses, you really are not encouraged to go beyond high school. There are those who do go, but once again, because of the culture, for so many kids who grew up, you simply know not to go. And that was the case it was for my wife as well as myself. So it's like, well, what are your options? Well, as a Jehovah's Witness, you're given very, very few options. In fact, for most people, especially for men, it's only just a few things. And for women, it's even less things. The big thing about the witnesses is they want you to spend as much time as you possibly can out advocating their material. And so as a result, many Jehovah's Witness kids take part-time jobs, and they do that right into their adulthood, all the way to their 60s many times. And they have little status levels that they can give you to make you feel better about yourself. And so as this becomes a normal, everyone around you is doing it. And so you kind of fall in line. And that's kind of what it was for me. After high school, I became what was known as a regular pioneer. And that at the time, you were required to get at least 90 hours a month, knocking on doors, offering magazines, going back to people's homes. That's what you did. And that is the life of so many people who grew up as Jehovah's Witnesses, or either they may get into a little business on the side, or they may go work some type of job. But in terms of trying to excel to be doctors and lawyers and pharmacists, that is simply just not in the cards. It's just simply not. And it impacts you later on in life, especially financially. Financially, it comes back, it literally circles around and comes back and bites you. It really does.
Yeah. Can you speak a little bit about the abuse allegations that are going on in the church and your personal experience with them and what you saw, heard, those types of things?
Yeah. Jehovah's Witnesses are having the same problem that the Catholic Church is having. And the reason why is because they handle what we call CSA issues the same way. They tried to handle it in-house and it failed. Unfortunately, Jehovah's Witness elders are quite different from elders many times in other churches. Many elders in other churches, they go to school. They learn things about, early childhood development. They learn things about psychology. So they know how to at least deal and manage with people. Your typical Jehovah's Witness has no training in any of those areas. And as a result, the way in which they handle it was they decided to keep it quiet. They would tell abuse victims, let's just leave it alone. And so these people became adults and they were having issues in their lives. They would go to their therapist and they would start talking. And then they would just start telling them, they were abused. And of course, the therapist is going to ask the question they always ask. Well, who did you tell? And they'll be sitting back there, they'll say, well, I told all the elders in the room. And so the therapist, you can imagine the therapist like, you told somebody this?
Yeah.
How many people? It was 5 of them? What?
Yeah.
What did they do? They told me to keep it quiet. And as a result, this stuff started hitting the fan. And now we see the Watchtower is now tied up in cases like this all over the United States and around the world. And one of the things that kind of makes it difficult for the Watchtower is the Watchtower does basically the same thing everywhere around the world. In fact, they often brag about we are unified as an organization. All of our congregations are the same. Well, what that means is judicial cases involving child CS8 cases are handled the same way. And so for lawyers, it's like shooting fish in a barrel, because if it was done over here in Southwest congregation, well, you know exactly how it was done over here in East Side. You know, the lawyers know. And this has been a concern for the Watchtower, and they have been doing everything in their power. They have renamed themselves. They've created different corporations to try to protect the assets. They have even gone so far as actually to change some of their teachings to try to get them in compliance. And so they're having a very difficult time right now. And it's all being done in the open, which is the worst thing for an organization like Jehovah's Witnesses. It's literally embarrassing. I mean, it's literally embarrassing. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you speak a little bit to what's going on in Pennsylvania right now?
Well, a while back, the Attorney General in Pennsylvania, they made a decision basically to have all congregations basically locked down, as it were. They are going to go from county to county to examine records and so forth to see what do Jehovah's Witnesses in the state of Pennsylvania have in their files, basically.
Yeah.
And they're going through. And at this point, it's a court order. They don't have any choice but to comply. Once again, the organization is struggling because of this. And it's kind of sad because many times the elders, and I remember when I was an elder, they would have us write things down in our own hand. You would write, they would give you instructions and they would have you write it in your own handwriting. And that way it was not on their letterhead. Okay. It wasn't on their letterhead. And so as a result, they can use, they can deny we didn't do that. And that's what you will see in many of the cases when they're on the stand. Oh, I didn't know about that. Oh, we didn't know. Nobody told me. And you'll be looking at these cases or these hearings and you're like, why are they doing that? This is not true. I mean, when you have an issue where one of the governing body who tells a court that he is not the mouthpiece of God, when Jehovah's Witnesses know that they view the governing body as the mouthpiece of God. It's the same as you with the Pope. And this man sat on stand and he said, oh, that would be presumptuous of us. How dare could we do something like that? You know it's pretty bad. You know it's pretty bad. And because of channels like this and other channels and the internet itself, the availability of information is at people's fingertips. So my wife and I, we always tell people, if anyone is ignorant of Jehovah's Witnesses in 2025, it's only by choice. It's only by choice.
100%. So what was your role in the church before you left?
Um, they have different levels. In most churches, they refer to people as either a deacon or the minister or the pastor or the reverend. Jehovah's Witnesses have basically two levels at the congregation level, and that is one is referred to as a ministerial servant, quote unquote deacon, and then the other position is an elder. And I served in both. I was also an elder, and the last thing I did when I was in the congregation, I was what was known as the secretary. So I handled all the correspondences, all the records. I maintained the files, and as a result, you have access to a lot of the internal things that are taking place in that particular congregation.
Can you speak to your time that you spent in the Watchtower in New York?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you can do, especially as a male, they have this opportunity that's known as serving at the world headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses. So wherever you are in the United States, you get to go and work at the branch located in Brooklyn, New York at the time. They moved further upstate as of now. But at the time, there were only about 6 million Jehovah's Witnesses, and there were 6,000 people who worked at any of the world headquarters offices around the world. So it's a very, very, within the Jehovah's Witness religion, it is very, very prestigious. It is basically, as we used to say, it is the Jehovah's Witnesses version of Harvard and Yale.
Okay.
That's how it is viewed. Yeah.
Okay.
And as a result, it is a very high level status position. Even though when you're there, you realize it's really nothing. But on the outside, for those who are back in the local congregation, when you travel, you go to visit in Chicago or you go to Los Angeles, you are highly praised. And in fact, mainly because most of these individuals come in, like myself, as a single person. So you come in as a single person at 19 years old and you're single. And the Watchtower organization is very similar to most churches today. There's a tremendous imbalance between men and women. And so you become, as they used to tell us when I was there, you represent the cream of the crop around the world. And of course, like I said before, you realize it's not quite as glorified as they paint it to be. But that's the image that they end up projecting. And so I worked there, and that's where all the publications, the books, the translation, anything that deals with the administrative level of the Watchtower, those things are handled there. And of course, if you're located in the New York office, you are there with what is known as the governing body. And what that translates into is in other churches, they will be known as the Pope. In the Mormon church, it would be known as the 12 apostles. So these are the highest level of Jehovah's Witnesses. They work at the headquarters, and they're responsible for all the different things that you see that's printed by Jehovah's Witnesses when you see them on the street.
Hmm. So were you involved with them directly then, or were you in more of a supportive role?
For the most part, when you first come in, you always will be in a supportive role. Only after you have served there for 20, 30, 40, and some people 50 and 60 years, you begin to move up the food chain. And that is what everyone's goal is to move up the food chain. But then, of course, there are people who they decide, they didn't make a decision, they want to leave. For many people, for family. Some people want to leave to get married. In the case of myself, I left to get married.
Yeah.
But you're right there, as we used to say, you're right there at the hub of everything that is happening within the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Okay. Could you go into some more detail about the interworkings, like what you would see with them wanting to rewrite or change the scripture that they've said? I've watched some of your videos that you have out, and you spoke a little bit to how was it 1914, and then that changed. That generation had passed away in Armageddon. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, that's one of the most unique things about Jehovah's Witnesses. Most religious denominations, they teach that their teachings are as solid as a rock. That's what they'll often say. Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in that. Their teachings are malleable. You can change them. It's almost like Play-Doh.
Yeah.
One thing is a teaching today, tomorrow it may not, which is really fascinating. And what happens is these teachings, unfortunately, have a tremendous impact on people's lives. Let me give you just a simple example. The Jehovah's Witnesses governing body made a decision to get into the personal and private lives of individual married Jehovah's Witnesses. They began to let Jehovah's Witnesses know that there were only certain types of intimate uh, things that you could do as a couple. It limited what you could do. And if you were caught or if you were reported, you would be disfellowship. Now, you may say, well, how would you ever get caught? Who would ever tell them what you and your wife are doing in the bedroom? Well, because of the way in which Jehovah's Witnesses are trained, they're trained with a guilt complex. And as a result, witnesses will actually turn themselves into the elders to let them know we've been doing things as a couple in our intimate life that is wrong. So people have been trained over the years literally to do that. Well, interestingly, a few years later, they came right back and decided to change it. And so what would have gotten a person kicked out of the church just a few short years ago, now it's a conscious matter. And Jehovah's Witnesses are taught to accept this because that is how the training is, to accept changes. And they have a very nice little catchy word they use. They refer to it as new light. That's the phrase that they use. And once changes are made, you accept it, and is basically never spoken about again. For many people, they know about the 1975 Jehovah's Witnesses predicted the world was going to come to the end.
Yeah.
So in 72, 73, 74, leading up to 75, the Jehovah's Witnesses as a religious denomination, and many articles were written about them in all kinds of papers around the world, that they're the world's fastest growing religion. And of course, there's a reason they were growing so fast, because people did not want to die at Armageddon, so people became Jehovah's Witnesses. And of course, in 76, the numbers, they begin to go down. Well, today, Jehovah's Witnesses, if you talk to them, you will find very, very few Jehovah's Witnesses who will even acknowledge that this was something that came out of their camp, but they own it and it's theirs. And so this is how they're able to change things, because the witness is taught. You accept it, and at that point, everyone around you refuses to talk about it. And so you have to just bear and grin, and that's what people have to do.
I guess you're so indoctrinated with this stuff. You didn't have anything in your spirit that was, like, checking yourself going, "Hey, this feels a little odd." Like, in the thick of it, you obviously did afterwards, as your time in there. But do people ever have, like, private conversations? "Oh, hey, look, changed again."
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's no question about that. People would often talk among themselves, but a Jehovah's Witness is trained. If someone is going down that route, you check them. Well, we really shouldn't be discussing that, brother. It's better we don't discuss that. And so basically, all along the route, you'll constantly check. So basically, it's almost like you walk into a room and something, a gunshot goes off, and you jump, and nobody else is moving, and no, it's like, didn't y'all hear that? Did y'all hear that? And so, and so, and so, what ends up happening is you end up thinking that you're the one
You're
with
the
the phone.
crazy one.
You're the crazy.
Yeah,
I didn't want to say that, but
that's
you're the
better.
crazy one.
Yeah.
And so after a period of time, you just learn not to mention this to people. And it becomes so bad that this comes right down to even families, husbands and wives and children, grandma, grandpa. You don't know who you can talk to freely. And the reason why is because they will turn you in. I'm really concerned about my husband. He's been talking a lot of things against the organization. I'm concerned that Satan might be almost ready to snatch him. And so at that point, the person thinks they're doing a good thing. They're going to help you spiritually because you're failing spiritually. And so this is a whole point behind high control groups. Um, People often refer to them as cults, but I like to use the word high control group because people are able to better grasp that. When you think of cult, you think of this guy with a long robe on, long beard, and you got the Rolls Royces, and you got the girls running beside the car, and they live up in the mountains somewhere.
Yeah.
That's what people oftentimes think of cults.
Yeah.
But sometimes cults will stand there with a Brooks Brothers three-piece suit on, and you may not realize it. And so the control is the main thing.
Okay.
And over the years, they have been able to control because you are not allowed to read other religions' publication. So if a witness knocks on your door and he offers you some of his literature, and you say, well, let me give you something. My church got that's real interesting as well. For decades, Jehovah's Witnesses would say, no, I don't want that. I've already found the truth.
Yeah.
And so in the last few years, before we left, the witnesses were learning to be a little bit more politically correct. So many witnesses were reminded, well, go ahead and take it and just throw it in the trash when you walk away. And so it would keep at least the person behind the door thinking, oh, wait, he took my literature too. When in fact, they just threw it in the trash and they got back to the car.
I was gonna say, isn't that what most people do when they get the literature from JTW?
That's what that's they say.
He's put it right burn file.
Yeah, they put it up in the bird cages. They don't these things. So yeah. And so these are the type of things that happen, and it keeps the witness in check. And because you are not allowed to go to other churches, you're not allowed to read other churches' published material, you only get one type of viewpoint. I had the chance to talk to someone who came from a communist country when I was, years ago. And the way they describe how they control the flow of information is very much like the same with Jehovah's Witnesses. Right? For example, right now, witnesses are pretty much told to stay off the internet if you're going to be going onto sites that are not sites from the Watchtower. So a Jehovah's Witness, realistically, if he went to another religious site to see and get information on how they interpret the scripture, and he was to mention it, I was up on the internet the other night and I found this very interesting article, and it's a different perspective than what. Oh no! Oh no! Oh no!
Yeah.
He wouldn't do that. He wouldn't do that. So now what they have to do is they have to sneak around and do this in the privacy of their home. They go up on the different little websites, and that's when we see them come to our channel, and you feel sorry for them because first of all, I know, and everybody in the organization knows, and every ex-Jehovah's Witness knows, if they get caught on the sites, they'll be in trouble. They will be in trouble. But yet, the curiosity, and the cat thing, they can't help it. And this is something that the Watchtower cannot control, what people many times do when there's nobody around.
Yeah.
I remember asking a person who's a Jehovah's Witness, was on my site, the site that my wife and I have. And I asked him, I says, I got a question. I says, as a witness, you're not supposed to be here. I says, how do you reconcile your God sees you, Jesus sees you, all the angels in heaven see you, and all of those who have been resurrected, who are Jehovah's Witnesses, who make up the 144,000, they're all in heaven looking down at you, sitting at your computer on my site. How do you reconcile that?
Yeah.
And I said, the problem is you actually fear the elders more than you fear your God. What does that tell you? And it's only when you talk to people like that can you help them to stop and think, that's true. I don't want the elders to see me on here. If they came over to my house and wanted to use my computer, I would be scared to death. One guy told me, he said, I was scared to death. One of the elders wanted to check his email. And he said, I knew he was going to go into my cookies. I knew he was going to go into my cookies. And so they fear these people, but yet their God, will see them from heaven and they have no fear at all. And that's because the fear of Jehovah's Witnesses is really around the leadership. And that's where it is. They basically substitute themselves for God. That's basically the bottom.